as we have lots to cover. All right, welcome back. Woo. We are Game 3004 in the winter 2022 semester at George Brown, and it's Mobile Game Dev 2, Week 5, Part 1 of our lecture recording and session together, broadcast, and so on. I know, eh? Gaslighting a lot. Making my own reality, my friend Vince. But, so this is where we are. We're sitting at Week 5, and we got lots and lots of stuff to cover. Let's get moving on where we are. So let's take a look at our project components. You've handed in your team contract, concept and game pitch, and first playable release. I need to mark these two for you guys still. Your project checkpoint has been released, and there's quite a few things for you to do for this one. And I want to start, before we get into what we're doing today, with the project checkpoint that I didn't really cover last week. Because of time. So let's get into it and look at that project checkpoint. So project part 4, your project checkpoint, again, it's due, it says Sunday, February 27th, but there are 2 types of requirements. So one of them is your project release requirements, and the second part is your presentation requirements. And so that there are 2 different dates for this one. It's almost like I could have done 2 different assignments, but I've kind of put them together into one because there's a bit of an update in terms of where you should be in terms of your project, as well as kind of discussing your project live during our time together. So the second part, let's go with the second part first, the easy one. So the easy one is your actual presentation, which is going to be your slide deck and your demo video and all that stuff. Notice that there's part 7, 8, and 9, right? So it says your slide deck, your project demo video, and your live demo. So your live demo is going to be done just like we did it last time during our lecture and lab hours. So there will be no lab or lecture during the week 7 time frame. So if I go back and if I look at where we're sitting at a week 5, right? Here's where lab 3 is. We'll have a lab this week, a lab next week, and then we're into your project checkpoint presentations and your that release. Project Part 5, your alpha release will be available then, and then you'll have a mid-semester break. Week 8, we'll come back for Week 9, where we get into the second half, where we start doing all mobile stuff from then on in. Okay, so this is where it's more mobile and less prototyping and stuff like that we've been doing so far. All right, so that is where we're sitting. We're sitting at Week 5. We kind of moved some things around, and Vince kind of noticed it too, where we said, let's make our AI agents, put them here in Week 4, and we moved, we're going to move some stuff from here into Week 5 and move things around a little bit. And the reason for this is because of some adjustments in terms of schedule and the things that you needed to get done. So that's why things moved around. And again, next iteration, I'll have all this updated. But for the most part, like it says up here on the top, subject to change in terms of like order. And so I'm trying to get you guys to have everything that you need. So your project checkpoint is a combination of a release and a demo. So that's what it is. So it's like your second playable release, kind of. That's what it kind of is. And that's what I've written here as well. So if you look at the top of your, this is available online on Blackboard. If you look at the top, it'll say something like, your project checkpoint demonstrates your progress for your semester project. You will also be required to include additional completed components, which will count as your second playable release. So it's kind of a mini release that you're doing. For this release, you will acquire or create as many graphics and sound assets as required to create at least 75% of your level. So more assets. If you already have this, that's okay. Your mini-map, inventory, and health system should be fully functional by this release. So by Week 7, so this week and next week, we'll have all of these components in place. Everything that I've mentioned that I haven't been able to show you will be shown. And again, I know. Isn't that awesome? It's pretty crazy for Week 5, right? So that's why we're moving things around. And that's why we're putting some more stuff into Week 4, which is what I did. And that's why I, move things around. So, by the way, believe it or not, this crazy schedule, I wasn't sleeping when I made it. I made it with, in addition, with Alex. Alex was in on it with me, so it wasn't like he wasn't around. Okay, so the thing that's going to be required is your 3rd official iteration for your game design document, where you will update your game concept, and as well as some common requirements. which mostly are similar to what we saw last time. So the load game option does not need to be functional, but you need to be able to save your game like we talked about last time. Option screen will be displaying audio options, so very similar to for everything else that we had, but key mapping should work at this point. So things that we didn't do last time will be due next time. Gameplay screen, where 75% of your assets should be fully functional. An inventory system should work. Your game must include a health system with health bars. We'll talk about that. If not this week, I think it's going to be next week. Your gameplay level must include a user interface that allows the player to pause the game and save the game and load the game from a specific game state snapshot. Pausing the game should be fully functional at this point, but saving and loading will not be required yet. Exactly. And your game will include sound effects and soundtrack. So the same things that you've already got already. More from your, slightly more actually, from your platformer runner shooters. So example, the death plane should be there, resets the character position, the nearest checkpoint. We talked about that already. 2 hazards instead of 1. You know, those kind of things. Resource gathering is fairly simple. Tower types, at this point, all towers should be fully functional for this release. Enemies, your towers should be able to destroy your enemy assets, as an example. And then again, it kind of works forward for the sandbox crafting game in the same way. Not a lot of people are doing this option. I think there's only one group. Third draft of your GDD. Your version control should be there. So for GitHub, deploy to live site, we'll be covering this again and reminding you how this is done so that you have everything done this week, as well as project management update due for week 7. So again, this is all due 2 weeks from now. Part of it is due when you're presenting. That's your slide deck, your project demo video, and your live demo. And it looks like a lot, but it's like little updates that you're basically making little tweaks and adjustments and additions. The big ones are the mini map, the inventory system, and the health system with pausing but not saving your game. That's how it kind of goes in terms of all the big stuff that you're kind of adding in. Okay. Zihan, yes. So key mapping is, yes, I know it's all that for 5%. But really what it's going to do, Marara, is kind of get you set up. It's like your mid-semester, it's exactly what it is, a mid-semester checkpoint, and it sets you up nicely for the second half of semester. So that when we come into the second half, you're ready to go with mobile, because that's where we want to spend a lot of more of our evaluations. Another reason for the low amount of marks, like 5%, is there's only updates more than anything else. So yeah, we'll talk about key mapping in a bit, and we'll say how that's done. So remember what I said last time was for key mapping, if we're going to do key mapping at all, and we're only going to make it available for the WebGL version of the game, for your mobile version of the game, it would be nice to get it going, but there's not going to be any keys because you're going to be touching most likely. You could adjust layouts, but that's all that would be required. But this is for the WebGL portion, which is in the first half. So how do we do key mapping and how do we do key remapping, if you will? I recommend some presets. That's what I recommend. So in other words, you select a preset where you and your team come up with some decent presets, and I say I recommend at least 1 or 2. So for example, you have a preset that here's how your typical keys are mapped. You might want to also turn on things like inverting the view, so on the y-axis, that kind of stuff. That's not difficult to do, but it does require testing. And the other thing that you may also want to think about is right hand versus left-handedness. So you could come up with some presets. So you can say, here's just like they do in some Xbox games and PS5 games, where they say, okay, select the preset, and then they also allow more customization. But all you need to do is basically say that this is the key mapping scheme, or this one. And then when you select one preset over the other, then the way your keys get input shift. That's all I recommend to you, for you to do. You could use scriptable objects as well. We haven't really covered that yet, but you could use scriptable objects. And again, the idea is, did you guys learn that yet from Nick on his side, or no?
You learned it from Joss.
So there you go. So again, these are all things that you can use. Again, we'll probably go over scriptable objects one more time, because it makes sense for our game that you would have some scriptable objects, especially things like how to how to set up your, your player properties, items, pickups, all that stuff can be with scriptable objects. And you're expected to remember the stuff you've learned from previous semesters. Okay, so it's not like, suddenly the course is a capsule that I'm going to teach you everything that you need to know in one course. No. Okay, that's not how it is, right? So, so there's some expectations there. So the thing is, for you, there's a lot of ways to do that, and scriptable objects could be a great way of mapping keys. So you load up your scriptable object. It has all your kind of inputs, which key is going to be used for what, and then what you do is you relate it to your input mapping. So instead of you hard coding it like we've been doing right now, this is a type of command pattern, okay, which is where you swap out the commands for the type of key. You don't hard code them at all. All right, I know that was said in like 2 seconds, and I should demonstrate it for you, and I will, but not today. Okay, so that is your requirements in a nutshell. Again, looks like a lot. All I've done is gone and iterated through each of these sections and then either updated, added, anything that was missing, and so on. So we're getting closer and closer to the state that you should be in by your mid-semester break. And then in the second half, it's not going to be so difficult. Key mapping. In the case of my team's tower defense, the design is constructed to accommodate full touchscreen controls. As far as I can forecast, WebGL build should work by making mouse clicks as touches. Should we add in some keyboard button-y things for the sake of executing the key mapping requirement? Yeah, because you've already done the mobile stuff. You've kind of accommodated everything for touch as it is. And because you're doing a tower defense, do you do any kind of fly-throughs or anything like that? Like, are you using your are you changing view kind of views for your game, or do you have a fly-through camera or anything like that to zoom in or zoom out anywhere? And if you did, and on the WebGL side, then you can add different kinds of controls, right hand versus left hand, and that would kind of accommodate that. So, for example, let's say typically your controls are WASD or your arrow keys. You can make it either or instead of both, instead of an and, right? So say, well, you're demonstrating key mapping by saying, typically, if I was going to do a fly-through camera, it'd be WASD and the mouse. And but if you're, let's say, opposite-handed, you were left-handed instead of right-handed, then you would do, maybe what you want to do is you have your, your fly-through controls with your right hand, which is going to be near your arrow keys, and the mouse would be on your left hand, right? So that's how it would be. And so you could remap some of that stuff. So that's a way of doing it. So left-handed or right-handed mode. Just like Joss always goes in on colorblind mode. He does a lot of that, right, when it comes to adjusting colors and those kind of things. You can do the same thing with key mapping. But yeah, Sam, we could definitely strategize about that if we come to that. Okay, so that is your requirements, guys. I'm sure there are going to be questions coming out of this one. Please read the document carefully, and then we'll make sure I'll get all those questions answered by next week, worst case scenario. But mostly what I'm asking for is another iteration. It shouldn't be that crazy for your another playable build that you're going to be doing between now and next week, and then your demo, right? So show me what you got, kind of thing. All right, so that is that's your requirements, and we're into week 5. As you can see, there's a lot going on in week 5. Some of this has been moved to week 4 from last week, and some of it's going to be in this week and the next week. Okay, so it's going to be a different spread 4, 5, and 6 than what it reads here exactly, but you'll have pretty much everything that we've got in here, just in a different order. Okay, and lots of stuff, lots of little topics and things that are being installed. Okay, so let's move on to the second piece. I wanted to talk about the PowerPoint. I also have some information in every PowerPoint. This PowerPoint here, it kind of talks about, first of all, what we did last week. We did Blender and Unity. We've been doing kind of a Blender hour. We're going to do a little bit of Blender this week as well, right? We kind of made a little enemy robot, and we brought it in, which we did mostly on Thursday of that week. Plus, we built a very simple nav mesh and a nav mesh agent with off-mesh links. And what we want to do is we want to deploy to GitHub pages this week, right? That was what it was supposed to be last week. So I don't think we got around to deploying to WebGL or doing this piece. So we're going to do that this week. All right, so that's what's happening. WebGL and deploy to GitHub pages. But this week we're going to make a simple coin mesh. That's what we're going to do. We're going to use a mirror modifier like we've done before. We're going to UV unwrap using project from view, which is a different way of doing it. We're going to add materials and a texture, multiple textures, right? And we're also going to do a simple animation in Blender and bring that into Unity. We're going to create a animator controller in Unity to account for the animation clip that's coming in from Blender and make the coin rotate. That's what's going to happen. We're also going to make a mini map that's going to happen on Thursday, as well as add a death plane and a player respawn point. We're going to also deploy to WebGL and GitHub pages. Whew, lots of stuff happening this week for Lab 3. So that's what's going on with the lab. Stuff that's due. Again, mid-semester checkpoint's been released. Please take a look there. 5th weekly report. Please don't forget to do that. Most of you are doing it great now compared to what we saw before. So what about mini-maps? We've talked about them before in when we were doing 2D last semester. So that's when, for those of us who took that course together, that was GAME 2014, right? So we did, I know, UV unwrapping is pretty challenging. We talked about mini-maps, and you can see that this is more of an advanced type of mini-map with additional controls. This is great to add things like, some people do this kind of thing where you, if you're going to look at the mini-map anyway, then you want to do things like have a bunch of stuff in there, kind of around that control area. And what you can do, notice that there's an X here. What you may want to do is, press on the X when you're in mobile, and it'll go away. And then you need to have some way of bringing it back up, right? So the mini-map doesn't always have to be there, only when you need it. Okay, so that's mini-maps. And there's different kinds of resources that we can use, to make that to go. Typically what we want to do is different layers. And for this week, I've given you all the resources we had the last time, so we don't have to remake the player markers and all those kind of things that you see here, okay? We're also going to be talking about a little bit of post-processing, okay? So one of the things that we do when we do post-processing is when we do OpenGL, we use things like we modify something called an FBO or a frame buffer object in OpenGL. I don't know if you guys remember that. For some of you, it's a bit of a nightmare, sure. And what we did with remember? Yeah, I know. So you also did, the difference between forward rendering and deferred rendering. You guys should know the difference between those two things. So what Unity allows us to do is we can do things with the deferred pipeline. So we can use the render pipeline to do deferred rendering, and we can use post-processing effects inside of that pipeline, all right? So even the regular pipeline, not the SRD or the HDRP or anything like that, or the URP, allows you to do post-processing effects. It does work. You can make it work. And remember, for mobile, we want to keep these post-processing effects to a minimum. They have to be very kind of targeted and adjusted for what we need to do. So typically the flow is when we're doing it with OpenGL, we bind to a multi-sample frame buffer. We render the game as normal. We blit the multi-sample frame buffer to a normal frame buffer, and then we unbind the frame buffers. Remember that whole thing you guys did in OpenGL? Maybe some of you did it exactly like this. And then we use a color buffer texture from the normal frame buffer in post-processing shader, and then we render a quad, so a screen size quad, the whole thing, as output. So really, instead of rendering the way we would normally do in using deferred rendering, we're actually rendering to a quad instead of the way you would normally render. And this is the typical flow when we're using OpenGL. So similarly, when we use, when we're doing it in Unity, we're going to do things the same way. So ping pong texturing is also a process that we can use for when we want to render multiple post-processing effects at the same time. Right, where we have multiple textures. Again, we're talking about full screen quads, and what we're doing is layering them one on top of the other. And a lot of times what we do is we have we have an input for multiple FBOs as an example, and we go from texture A is rendered into texture B is rendered via an FBO, texture B is then rendered via another post process and into texture A, and so on. Right, so we can kind of really do a lot of manipulation by using frame buffer objects in real life. What this does for us is it allows us to do color grading and correction, right? Which is really what we want to do. And color grading and correction and color correction is used for things like day-night cycles. So for those people who want to use a day-night cycle in their game, what you can do is you can use color grading to change the scene to make it look like it's more night or more day, and all that kind of stuff. So it's really great what you can do by just modifying the color grading of the entire scene, which is pretty cool. Yes, we can use the universal render pipeline when we get to that point in Unity. So what we want to do, of course, let's just do a little bit of color theory. Again, when we think about colors, we have warm colors and cooler colors. And again, the cooler colors are used for things like a nighttime scene or a winter scene, and the warmer colors are used for summer scenes and daylight. Okay, this is what we normally do. Yeah, I know, Kiara, but what they're doing is the scriptable render pipeline, which is what the URP is and the HDRP is something that works really good in terms of how much control we have. And it works great with 3D compared to just using mobile. For mobile, we have to really be careful because mobile doesn't support HDRP. Okay, just letting you know. So don't try and push yourself to install the HDRP on your Unity project. That would not work well with mobile. You would actually make it so that you'd have to rejig every single shader, and we may have to do that anyway if we're moving into the URP. Okay. So warm colors and cooler colors. And you can see here, we can enhance the atmosphere of an image. For example, this is the image. Remember that every time we look at a scene, in effect, in essence, we're doing the same thing that we're doing with frame buffer objects in Unity, right? So here's an example of that, where if you look at the scene here, right, let's suppose it's the same scene with the same assets, but just graded differently from a color grading and correction perspective. So you can see here we got yellows, we got more reds here, and there's different effects with the lights too. We don't just kind of grade the scene, but we also change the lighting just slightly, and so you can create different kinds of effects with the exact same models and meshes. Okay, which is the idea behind this. And usually we use this in the film industry, and it creates things like emotion. And we can use it to emphasize, kind of a scary scene, or you can bring up, stuff in terms of, happiness, especially when you first start off. I've seen a lot of games that start off in a very happy scene, and then as the day goes on, it gets darker and darker and darker, and then the zombies come out and you fight zombies, right? So it's pretty cool. Yeah, so mobile doesn't support it because it's a lot of CPU and GPU power. And remember that typical, if you have a dedicated GPU on your mobile device, if you do, you're lucky. And if you don't, and if you have a late kind of a phone that's kind of a late model iPhone, one of those kind of things, or Android device, then a lot of those devices have the capability to do the HDRP. It's just not supported from a Unity perspective. Yeah, so yeah, it will be something in the future for sure that'll allow it. But right now, if you try and do color grading and correction to the ultimate level with the HDRP or something like that and put it out to mobile, Unity won't support it. So don't try and do it, guys. Yeah, that's all I'm saying. Absolutely, color grading is amazing. What you can do with it, it's really incredible. Just from a color grading and lighting perspective, what you can do to really make the scene awesome. Okay, so that's it. So really, what we do is in real life, what we would do is if we're doing this from scratch in OpenGL, we would use something called a lookup table, and a lookup table is like a 3D texture, and we can sample from the 3D texture different points. And then use that, again, the LUT, which is what it's called, is created usually using something like Photoshop. So we take a snapshot of your scene, when it's running, and we put it into Photoshop. We create a LUT, which is a lookup table, and then from that we bring that back in. If we're going to go through the whole process, back into your program, and by the way, Unity does support a lookup table, although it's a little bit deprecated compared to what we do now because of the scriptable render pipeline. Scriptable render pipeline takes a lot of this and does it for you, but this is what you do. You get a 3D lookup table that's created from the current images and colors in your scene, and then what you can do with that is you can change the color with Photoshop, create another lookup table to color correct different parts of the scene, which is really awesome. So that's the first step. So the first step is you make a 3D texture. The second step is you create a screenshot of your game and insert the color cube information to the image. And you load this screenshot into Photoshop or Paint.net as an example, or GIMP, or any other color correction application you prefer. And then what you can literally do is change the way that the color information is adjusted in your game so it looks a lot differently. So for example, here's an example of some images. Here's these two, and you can see that what's happened is here is two images. They're the exact same image, one with more with color correction applied. Okay, so really kind of cool. So again, one thing that's being done is it uses HSV, which is an alternate representation of RGB, right? As an example. It's like every pixel on the screen. Yes, it is. It's every pixel on the screen in 3D. And the attribute is, so the hue is, notice what it is kind of in this rotation, kind of this way. So you're moving from one type of color to the other. That's kind of the perceived color spectrum, is the hue. And the saturation is how much more pigment is basically is added to the hue to create deeper and deeper colors on the same spectrum. The value is how bright the colors are. So if you have a low value but lots of saturation, you're going to have a lot of pigment that's very dark. If you have high value and high saturation, you're going to have a very light, fully pigmented object, right? As an example. And as you drop the saturation levels, it's going to go towards white. That's how it normally works. Okay. Exactly. I think is the way it was. So that's what they call it, the colorfulness of a stimulus relative to its own brightness. But really, what I like to look at is more pigment. It's like you're adding more and more pigment to the color. That's your HSV, and that's what it uses. It uses HSV for color grading. Okay. So really, in Unity, what we have is something called the post-processing stack that we're going to be using. And there are instructions on what to do. So you can see what we can do. We can color grade a scene here. And this is right from Unity post-processing, where we can add things like different kinds of post-processing effects. And the most common ones are bloom, right? As a good example. And also, you can also do depth of field and many, many other types of post-processing effects that can be added in. We need to add our post-processing stack through the package manager, and we'll talk about how to do that when the time comes on the Unity side. And what we want to do is once we add in the post-processing stack, we want to add the post-processing layer to the camera, the main camera of your scene. And then once we do that, we can add things like other kinds of post-processing volumes in there. Okay, so a post-processing volume is typically what we want to do, and it's kind of an empty game object that appears in your game, post-processing volume. And then what you can do is you can add things like bloom or other kinds of effects like that, which I'm going to go into with you guys a little bit on Thursday, so you can make your scene pop that much more. You can also do color grading and other things. Yeah, and I mean, bloom is pretty crazy at what they do. So when it comes to time of day systems, one of the easiest things to do is use color grading, right? So we can get that time of day thing happening, which is pretty cool. One other thing that we can use is we can use an actual sun object in the game. We can also keep global time when we're using a time of day system. And the global time, what it's going to be is you're going to have a ratio of time that is going to be shown in the game. So for example, every minute is going to represent some accelerated portion of the day, right, as you go forward. And you need to adjust that according to your gameplay. So for example, if you say, I want it to take 5 minutes or 6 minutes, each minute is an hour, of your day. So after 12 minutes, you've moved half a day. And after 25 minutes or 30 minutes, you've kind of completed a whole day of time. And usually it's 24 minutes, let's say if you're going to go there, or 48 minutes, or whatever the ratio that you have. You can literally move things around the scene every hour, just like you're moving the sun in the world relation to the time of day. You can add a moon that also introduces weaker light into the scene at the same time. It's an actual object that is literally underneath the plane of the world that you kind of shift around. So what you're doing is you're literally rotating the sun and the moon as different objects, actual objects that are opposite each other as they're rotating. And that's the way you would do it to create that really cool effect.
Just to clarify, would the day-night cycle be like a requirement, or nice to have for the next milestone?
It's only required for your procedural generated game. That's the only time. So if you're making a procedurally generated game, that's the only time it's required.
Would AI also count as procedural? Like we can get that to work?
No, I'm talking about for the third type of game, which is your sandbox crafting survival game. That's what I'm talking about here. All right. So if you're not making that type of game, then this is not required. You could add it, but it's not required. Okay. So how do you do it? I'm talking about how to do it, and you can do it with post-processing effect and 2 different objects that capture different light. And what we want to do is ambient light can keep the game playable at night. So you increase the ambient light at nighttime so that you can actually see. Otherwise, it'd be very, very dark in the scene, right? And you can also add other lights, some particle effects. Those kind of things can also add stuff during the nighttime, and you can turn them off during the day. A lot of this is basically a shift between, and what you want to do a lot of times is do a LERP, linear interpolation, between the amount of light that you have at different hours. And so slowly it's shifting, as opposed to abrupt shifts in daylight, which we don't want. Okay, similar to what Minecraft does in many ways. We talked last week about navigation and pathfinding, and what I've done here is I've added additional information for you to things that we've done. Notice that we've also added stairs here as well. So this is another topic. And last week what we created is off-mesh links to go from one part of the scene to the other. One thing we didn't accomplish last week is this idea of stairs and ramps. We're going to add this over the next couple weeks to kind of go through what this would look like and how to make this seem more natural when you have objects that go from one part of the scene to the other. All right, so that's what we're doing. And navigation systems are easy to add in, like as you saw, they're quick to add. But what we want to do is procedurally generate that system so that if I was to take those map tiles that we have right now and throw them into the scene, it'd be great if we could dynamically map the nav mesh to each of the tiles instead of pre-mapping them from the beginning, because then they won't connect properly. All right, so we talked about how to do that last week, and these are some of the things that we talked about in terms of making a nav mesh agent and how to build a nav mesh and bake it onto the scene. So stuff that we've already talked about. And I'm just going to mention a tutorial here to make that nav mesh work better. There's some tutorials here that we had in here. Okay, a couple things. Sam says, anybody had any luck removing ambient light from a Unity scene? I've tried messing with the lights in the scene, changing the skybox, but can't get total dark. Yeah, you need to. If you work with the lighting window, you can do a lot and make it very, very dark. And a lot of times it's your directional light in the scene is something that you can play with to get that done. So if you change the angle of your directional light and change the way the ambient light picks things off from the skybox and so on, you can turn that off as things rotate. Okay, so that is kind of the stuff we talked about. I just want to start the stuff with Blender today, and we'll complete the Blender stuff and the Unity stuff next day when we have more time. So let's get into that, as we've done, kind of covered most of the material that I wanted to, just from a high level from the lecture part. I want to right click here onto Blender, and I want to run it as administrator. And this, my friends, is what we're going to do at a much quicker pace again than normal. So again, great thing is I'm recording this, and this will be part of your lab requirement for this week. So when we first start off, hopefully you're in there with Blender with me. Check mark if you're in Blender, please. Check mark. I want to wait for you guys to be there. I know some people also like to watch this afterwards and get it done. That's fine. But this is good. So I've got like about 19 of you out of 31. Let's see if we can get a few more. All right. Just want to get you guys ready to go. I wish it was like that for me. For me, it takes a long time to launch Blender, but that's because I have a lot of stuff going on. All right. Thank you so much for that. I think it's other apps for sure. All right. Thank you for that feedback. Good. So now we're going to start. And now that we've got Blender going, let's delete the cube. So this cube, let's get rid of it. So delete. Goodbye. We also want to turn off the light in the camera in the scene just so that way it's easier to use. And what I want to do quickly is I want to add a cylinder. So again, you can add a cylinder mesh. Again, there's some assumptions I'm making here now, guys. We've done Blender a couple times. And again, you can use some of the tools we have here to add, or you can use shortcut keys to do the same thing. So Shift A is a shortcut key. I can add in a cylinder. And notice the cylinder that I'm adding in here is very complex. On the bottom left, you can see that we have 32 vertices. We want to go down to 12, please. Let's do that first. Okay, so 12 vertices. You can see that that's the case, right? And what 12 vertices does is it reduces the amount of edges for the coin that we're going to make here in Blender. Okay. Now this is not a cylinder. We want to make it a coin. And notice that the cap fill type is an n-gon. An n-gon is anything that is not a triangle or a quad. Quad being 4 vertices. N-gon can be 5, 6, 7, whatever it's going to be. All right. So we're going to start with an n-gon, but we're going to create quads later today. All right, that's what we want to do. All right. So what we're going to do here is we need to reduce or scale this coin in so that it's a some level. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press the S key. Okay. Yes, I'm on YouTube as well. So the S key, please. So plus the S key. And the S key is going to scale. So again, what you want to do is take the S key and scale down. But we want to scale only across the Z axis. So again, what we do to constrain that is to press the S key followed immediately by the Z key. All right, so we constrain across the Z axis that way. So again, S followed by Z constrains it across the Z axis, and we want to come to the point where it's something like this. So it looks like a pretty fat coin. Okay, and notice what we have here is on the Z side from a scale perspective. I'm going to change this to 0.15. That is going to be my scale. Okay, so 15% on the Z axis. We're making a loonie, that's right. Now what we want to do is we want to look at this in front view. So the front view we want to use is the 1 key, which is, you can also get to it from view, and you can go to viewpoint front, right? So that's the front viewpoint. Numpad 1 is the key. And we want to rotate this across the Y axis, right? So again, we want to press the R key followed by Y followed by 90. Okay, so something like that looks like this. So if I press the R key followed by the Y axis followed by 90, I'm going to get something that looks like this. Okay, so I've rotated this way, and the reason why I want to rotate it this way is because I want to split it in half, because I want to use the mirror modifier to do everything on the right side happens on the left side, right, which is what I want to do. So again, I've got it in this position right here. Okay, going back to my question now, are you with me? Do you have a cylinder that you've compressed to 15% on the Y-axis or on the Z-axis, and have you flipped it to look like this from front view? Yes, you're good. You're getting better, guys. You're getting faster. Soon you're going to be faster than me. All right, that's how I want it. Awesome, thank you. All right, let's clear that. Thank you for that feedback. So now what I want to do is I want to go into modeling mode. So into modeling mode, remember that we have access to all the vertices. And I want to go into the front view in modeling mode, scroll in. So we have kind of a nice view of everything that we're seeing right here. And what we want to do is we want to chop this thing in half by using a loop cut and slide. Now on the left, there are some keys that you can use a loop cut as well. You can use the shortcut key, which is Control R. So Control R is the shortcut key, right? You could do that. Or what you can do is you can use a loop cut and slide here. So if you do that, then you can implement a loop cut and slide. Notice when I press this button, if I go to the right side, we get a horizontal, a vertical cut. And when I go to the top, I get it's the other way around. Horizontal cut if you go to the right side, vertical cut if you go to the top or the bottom. We want a vertical cut, however you get that done. So left click, please. And then don't move it and just press enter. Okay, that's what you want to do. So we don't want to make more than one cut. So now what you want to do is click away from this thing. So you don't want this to be on if you're going to use this at all. So okay, click something else, all right? What we want to do also on this is we want to deselect all. And again, once you have that vertical cut, so it looks like you've cut this thing in half now, right? What we want to do is we want to deselect all, right? So select none, basically. By the way, by accident, if you move your three-dimensional cursor around in the wrong spot, you can put it back there by pressing Shift S, right? And what Shift S will do, let's do that again, Shift S, you can go cursor to world origin, which is where the cursor will launch stuff, and that's kind of like your pivot point for the scene. What we want to do now is we want to go into wireframe mode and chop away half of the geometry, just like we did for the robot last week, right? So again, what I want to do is go into wireframe mode. So that is clicking this button up here or pressing the Z key. And then using box select mode. Again, box select mode, you go into box select here or press the B key and selecting the left vertices on the left-hand side until you've covered all of them. Not the middle ones, just the left-hand vertices, right? And once you've got that, press the delete key and delete the vertices, my friends. And now you should have half a coin. That's correct, yeah. The 3D cursor is where things spawn, and we can use it for other reasons. Okay, for now, just leave it where it is in the middle. Even if you didn't, it's okay, because we're not going to spawn additional items here. So now this is what you have. In layout mode, it'll look like this, like you actually have half a coin. Okay, but we don't want layout mode. We want edit mode, right? So that's modeling mode, or you can switch into edit mode. It's up to you. And I want to kind of use it like this. So here's half the coin. Now, it doesn't matter whether you're in edit mode or in object mode or modeling mode or layout mode, respectively. It's the same thing. But on the right, you can add a modifier anytime you want. The only time you can apply a modifier, though, is in object mode. Right now, you can't apply a modifier, but we can add one. Let's add one. So we're going to add modifier, and of course, we're going to add in the mirror modifier, which actually duplicates our geometry, right? But the mirror modifier only works, let's undo that change, for things that have been added. So for example, if I want to select all and then add the mirror modifier, then it's going to, what we want to do is make it so that it adds a mirror modifier here. Notice that it's not added. Even if we add this thing here, right, as an example. So if I split across here inside of edit mode, it won't do things properly. So the way to do that, I find easier, is in object mode. So in object mode, when I'm looking at the front, and then what I want to do is go into the add modifier, add a mirror modifier, and then if you don't see this, what you may need to do, and it really depends on how you set things up, is you may need to play with these buttons. So you don't want the mirror on the X, on the Y, but actually on the Z. And what happens is, once you've done that, you have the coin that's in full view. Okay, play with these numbers depending on how you did it. I did it this way. So now you can see that I have the coin and it's duplicated. It's back to its original glory. So back to modeling mode, you can see that now I have double the geometry, but I only have control over half of it, right? So you can see that if I go back into solid mode by clicking this button up here or pressing the Z key, because you can toggle solid to wireframe mode by pressing the Z key. Why mirror? Because whatever I do on the right side, Vineet, happens on the left side. So I only have to do it once. If I don't mirror, then I have to do the same modifications twice. We don't have the time for that. Okay, so I'm not doing that. I'm doing it once. Right, time saving is what it is. So now that I've mirrored everything and I've split everything in half, then what I want to do here is I want to deselect all. This is in modeling mode. And what I want to do is select all of these vertices here, right? So again, what I can do is go into front view. I want to go into wireframe mode, but I only want to select these ones, not the middle vertices again. So again, let's press the B key for box select all these vertices here. And you can see that those are the ones I want to select. You'll see that these are the ones that are selected, but not the middle verts. What I want to do now is I want to press E for extrude, for extrude, and then enter immediately. Okay, I'm just writing it in the chat so you get it. So E to extrude, and then enter. So if you do that E to extrude, enter, what you're actually doing is you're doubling the geometry, the number of vertices. It's like you have vertices that are sitting on top of vertices. They're directly on top of each other. And why is this good? Because then if I take the coin and I just do a scale, let's go back into solid mode so you can see this. So I scale in, right? You can see that I have additional geometry now. Take a look at that. So I want to kind of scale in to about something like, looks like that. And from a resize perspective, so you see I've got a bit of an edge now on the coin, typically how we normally get it, right? And that's by adding additional geometry. So I've actually scaled the top vertices inbound across the side of the coin. That's what I'm doing. So it has all the required cuts all at the same time to make that little edge. That's what I'm doing here all at the same time, right? So on the left, you can see that what I've done is I've scaled in these vertices to 90%. That's what I've done. Okay. Now that I've done that, I want to do another extrusion. Okay, so I want to do the same thing. So again, it's E to extrude, enter. And what I want to do is I want to press E to extrude again, and this time I want to push it inbound so that it kind of creates a crease. Now, if you can't see it, and that's okay, I can undo that. I can look at it from front view and in wireframe mode, so you can see what's going to happen. If I extrude inbound now, you can see that it's going to go in a portion of the way into the model, right? So it's actually pushing these faces in, just like a normal coin would be, to create a ridge for the coin. See that ridge? And what I've done is I've pushed it in about negative 0.05. Let's do that. So negative 0.05. That's how much I pushed it in. Now going back to Vineet's question, it's happening on the left side the same as it's happening on the right side. So if I looked at it in layout mode, you're going to see that both the left side and the right side have the same ridge. Okay, this fat coin we've made. Okay, are you with me? Do you have this right now? Okay, cool, nice and easy, right? So this is our coin. It's not really exciting. Okay, it's not really exciting. But the great thing about doing a coin like this is that you can use the same techniques that we've made to make this happen. We're not quite done because we have a lot of n-gons. Let's talk about those n-gons. I know, imagine if I had a coin as fat as this in your wallet, absolutely. But imagine now, I have a lot of n-gons here. Let's go back to modeling mode and talk about these n-gons. So I'm going to go back into solid mode and take a look at these things, right? Look at the n-gon I have here. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 points for my n-gon. This is terrible in terms of a bunch of stuff. 1, UV unwrapping is bad. And 2, when it comes to texturing and, all the wheel shortcuts, I know. It's amazing what you can do. So at the end of the day, what we wanted, when we think about this, when we're thinking about how this is done, we need to create additional cuts. We need to create additional cuts. And what I want to do, I'm going to deselect all for a second, and I want to make cuts so that I have pie-shaped pieces. So I want to create quads, but they're actually going to look like pie shapes. How do I do that? Well, look, I have 1, 2, 3 vertices. That's like a triangle. And then I have the middle one. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. That's a quad. That's going to be way better for us to slice the pizza. Exactly. That's what we want to do. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to make a cut that goes from one side to the other, right? So the idea is to be is to be strategic in how we do it. So I'm going to look at it from the right side this time. This is kind of an important thing to do. And I want to plan how I'm going to do my cuts, because I want to do my cut this way and this way. Okay, so I have these three vertices as one pizza slice, and these three vertices another pizza slice. But I can also do it this way. These three vertices is the first pizza slice, and these three vertices in the second pizza slice. I want to probably go this way, and the reason why is because if I did that, so here's a pizza slice, then I have half of the geometry cut in half over here when I need to. So what I mean is, now how do you do a cut? On the left, notice that there's loop cut. There's also something called a knife. Here's the knife. If you pull out the knife, you can select the knife edge that you want, and you can pull it up all the way. You can even rotate at the same time. You can pull it up so it connects with the other vertex, right? And then press enter, please, when you're hovering over the same vertex. If you press enter, it creates that knife cut. So it creates a cut that way. Loop cut and slide will not work when you do it that way. So that's the first knife cut. Okay, you can also do it with the K key. The K key is your shortcut. So K key for knife. Okay. If you do a triangle fan, it's worse when it comes to texturing, especially when we go to texturing organic objects. We never want to use triangles. We only want to use quads, because triangles deform the model in kind of a really ugly way. Okay, let's do more cuts. So we're going to do this one, this cut. We're going to go over to the other side, and there you have it, the first pizza slice. And we also have the middle slice here. We need to do one more slice to create the last slice. So notice there's a slice that's 3 here. We need to start from here, and we need to go to that side, and then we're done. So again, I'm going to take the knife cut, go from this side, and then we're going to go all the way to this side, and now we have the proper amount of cuts for making this all quads. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. And also we have a middle line cut, which we can use so we can separate this thing in half if we need to. So we can actually mirror this even more. So why did I do this? Well, once we do one side, we've done the other side. So now we have the proper geometry when it comes to how we've created our coin. Okay, questions around this? Questions around this? This is an important step because, again, what we're trying to do is get our geometry to be correct. Again, we prefer quads over triangles. Triangles bad, okay? Triangles bad, quads good is typically the way we want to do it. N-gons super bad. If you have an n-gon anywhere in your model, that is considered very, very bad from a texturing perspective and the way the materials will wrap themselves around that part. Okay, UV unwrapping becomes that much more difficult with an n-gon. All right, so nice. We have everything we have now. It's time to apply our modifier. And we're doing it early because we're going to have only one material. So again, going back to my layout mode, here's my layout mode, right? I want to apply my modifier by going back to the wrench after I've made these changes, going here to the mirror and clicking apply. Here it is. If I go back to modeling now, you can see that I have control over both sides, and Vignette, you can see that they're perfectly symmetrical. All right, which is what we wanted. Yes, you can merge faces by and removing cuts by right-clicking. So if I was to, let's say I wanted to get rid of this edge, let's say I have too many edges or too many vertices, I can press X, right, or the delete key, both work, and you can dissolve as opposed to remove, right? So if I click dissolve, it gets rid of that edge. Right? That's how it makes it work.
Sorry, sir. What is the difference between dissolve and remove? Like, is it the same almost?
No. What it does is, if you remove an edge, you also remove the vertices, right? If you dissolve the edge, it keeps the vertices but gets rid of the connection. All right? Not the same. It's just the way it works. It works way better. Same thing with the faces. If I have multiple faces, sometimes they're overlapping. I can get rid of a face. And then dissolve is way better than deletion because I'll lose some geometry, and dissolve will not allow me to do that. So really cool. All right, so cool. So that's how I did it. I'm going to go back now into layout mode. We don't have to do anything else with modeling mode. Let's save our coin. So save our coin for our Witcher, right? Let's do that. And go to Game3004, the Lab 3 sandbox. I'm going to put it in here. I'm going to call it coin.blend. And for those people who couldn't do it, I'm going to put it up on Blackboard right now. So coin.blend. There we are. And let's put it up on Blackboard. So that way you have it here. I'm going to put it into labs for lab 3. There's lab 3 assets. You're going to see that there's another set of assets I put here. I'm going to make another item. We're going to call this coin.blend. So worst case scenario, that you can start with this. We still have work to do, but we can start with this for next day. Okay, if you couldn't do this today. All right, so that's why I'm doing it with you. So to give you the options, you know, to still complete your lab and understand how I did it. Okay. There it is. There's that coin.blend and submit. Awesome. So that's your coin.blend so far. Any questions before we do one more thing? And I want to talk about this. I know we're going to run overtime again. We always do with this course. Geralt is happy for sure. Because at the end of the day, what we want to do is we want to make this, we want to unwrap these and we want to save it and export it to FBX. I want to try and do that before we go for the day. And it's going to help us a lot. All right. So, well, we won't be able to do the export completely. But one thing to note is, and we'll continue everything, but we do want to UV unwrap. And the way we want to do the UV unwrap is if I go to UV editing mode, notice that we'll have this split. We have the UV here, and we have this over here. We don't have a texture yet, but we want to UV unwrap in this case first, before we have any textures. We can always scale the islands up, the UV islands up, from where we get them over here. So one thing I'd like to do is on the right, again, I want to turn on, you know, kind of the solid mode or the shading mode, shaded mode. This is what it looks like. And what I also want to do is select all. So this is important. Notice that we have it already UV unwrapped for us. And it's not completely terrible. Look what it's done, actually. It's gone and done a lot of stuff for us. Do you have this? It's not terrible, but look at this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, 12 faces. But what about these ones in here, right? What about these ones over here? They're overlapping. These ones are overlapping. But what happened to all of these faces in here, right, that were created for us? They're not represented here in our islands. Our islands are represented here at all. They're actually, and the way to tell, if I switch out of this and into face select mode, and I select that face, you can see it's a line. It's actually not even going to be unwrapped properly. Now, there are some people who don't care because you're probably not going to see the texture that's going to appear in this face anyway. But that also means the shine and everything else, the way it's going to be rough and scratchy and all that stuff is also going to be removed. I'm not happy with this, so I'm going to do it slightly differently. Okay, just letting you know. So what we want to do here is I want to start unwrapping from a UV project. Okay, so the way to do it is select all, take it to one angle, and I recommend start with the side view, so the 3 button. That's where I'm going to start. Okay, and if I deselect, I only want to select the stuff that I can see from this view. Okay, so I only want to select the stuff that I can see from this view. So again, in side mode, I want to use some kind of selection tool like the circle select, and I only want to select those areas that I can see. Notice that the pie shapes will appear on the left-hand side, and only the shapes that I want will appear. Notice that those shapes, even these ones, are very bad because they appear as lines. We need to UV project. Now, the other way you can try, and I'll try this with you as well. Let's just deselect. And if we select all and then do an unwrap, so press the U button for unwrap. Okay. So again, it's the U button for unwrap. U to unwrap. Okay. Press the U to unwrap. If I do that, so again, I'm here and I press unwrap. We can try and do smart UV project. And sometimes it produces very nice UV islands. Let's see what happens when I do that. So click it, and you can see it'll ask me for the angle limit. We can play with this angle limit to be better. But if I press that and press OK, you can see that we get very nicely unpacked UV islands that look like this, for the most part. So stuff that worked well, and there's stuff that didn't work well. Let's talk about the stuff that did not work well. These ones did not work well. These little islands here are not proportional to what we're seeing inside the map. If these are not proportional, you'll see squished textures inside of here. And the line texture, this line texture right here, is also not correct. However, these ones in here are pretty good, right? So we want to keep these ones, and those ones, by the way, to test this, if I deselect all and I select those ones, which ones are they? Well, they're these ugly ones up here, these squished ones. So you can see that this is actually not good. Okay? Again, let's go back into this and select all this time around. And what about if I tried to do a, again, smart UV project? Instead of that, if I did a cylinder projection? Well, it's going to be messed up. It's really bad. What if I just did a regular unwrap? If I cleared the, if I reset the map completely, so this is reset, and what if I just did a regular unwrap? What was that do? Well, it doesn't really work, right, if you did it that way. So that's no good, okay? We can also we can try and do a smart UV project again. You're going to get the same result. Or you can do, if I went to unwrap, again, it won't allow me to do, it says failed to solve 1 out of 1 island. So one of these islands, it doesn't like. So what if I did the other thing, which is deselect all, use your circle select, and just select the stuff that you can see. Just the stuff that you can see. So now you can see that these are the islands we can see. The ones that we can't see are the ones in here and in there. Okay, we can't see those ones yet. Let's leave those out for now. But we want to kind of go from this particular angle, right? And what I want to do is I want to press unwrap, and then I want to project from view. Project from view. You don't need to undo. If I did this, now I have a perfectly unwrapped shape. Take a look at that I've done. So I've unwrapped it from view, right? And that's the right side. Now to get to your left side, again, all I've done is I've unwrapped it from the view, the thing that we're looking at. Be careful not to resize the view because you'll have different sized islands. What I want to do now is I want to go view, and I want to go to, up here. I want to go to view, and I want to go to viewpoint, and I want to look at the, instead of the right side, which I'm looking at now, I want to go to the left side, which is going to select the other side. I want to deselect all, and now I want to select this side with my circle select again. So circle select, I select the other side. You can see how it's building up the stuff that I'm selecting over here. And then what I want to do is I want to unwrap, and I want to do the same thing, project from view, which again is going to make that wheel in the same spot. So far, so good. Now I want to do it from the front, the back, the top, and the bottom, and deselect the faces I don't need. Okay, so again, I want to do it from the front, deselect all, and only select the faces you need that are full faces. So for example, most likely the way you're going to see it is, I mean, you can't do these ones exactly, but I can probably grab these two, but not these two small ones. Don't grab these two small ones, but the other ones are okay. Again, it's not going to be perfect, guys, in this way. So if I grab these, I just want to select these ones. Okay? And for those ones, they look proportional here, but again, they probably aren't proportional there. So what I want to do is unwrap from project from view. Now you can see that they're going to be proportional. Let's do the other side. So that's from the front. Let's again go from view, and we go viewpoint from the back. So you can see that that's not selected. Deselect all, and select those ones again with the circle select. Okay, those ones. And again, you notice that the islands will form in different places. I'll say unwrap, smart project from view, and you can see again, those are put into place. Two more, the ones on the top. So again, if we go to the top, right from the top, deselect all, and only select those ones that you're going to see. We've already unwrapped these ones. We don't need to unwrap those, but we do need to unwrap these ones, the top verts. Okay, these ones here. Unwrap, project from view. Okay, and then the same thing from the bottom. So again, I'm going to the bottom, underneath. Again, you can use your viewpoint to get there, right, for the bottom if you want to. Or if you know the shortcut keys, that's fine. And I want to do the same thing, to select the bottom, and then unwrap, project from view. Right, there we go. Now we're missing some. The ones we're missing are the ones in here, okay? The ones we're missing the ones in there. And I want to do them kind of all at once, right? Because this is where I want to use Smart UV Project. So again, I want to kind of select all these by hand. Please do this by hand. Make sure there's nothing else selected, just the wheel, the stuff that's inside the edges. It's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be way better than what we see here right now, right? Make sure you select all these and all these on the other side, please, not that one. All of these. Again, just being very carefully selecting everything so we can unwrap these islands, and then we have nice places where we can attach our, there we go. Those are all of them on both sides. You can see that I've selected all those. And now I can do an unwrap, and I want to do a Smart UV Project for those ones. And if I do that and press OK, we're going to see that those ones are pretty much not great. Okay, but they're not bad either. At least they're all proportional, right? Again, most likely, guys, we're not going to see these too well, right? But we also want there to be enough of them so that they look right. The other thing we could do is we could scale them, the actual these ones, so that they're in the right orientation. We can do one at a time, and you can try and do other ones as well. For example, let's suppose I still have those selected, and I just want to do a regular unwrap, right? You can see that that also works. So it actually does an unwrap. We can also do a Smart UV Project, right? Or I can say follow active quads, right? So that's also something we can do. It works out to be the same. If I do a cylinder projection, you can see that that is messed up, right, for those ones. So, like I said, I like to use Smart UV Project, right, as an example. When you do that, you can change the limit angle. And what the limit angle does is, you know, the higher the angle for less distortion, right? So let's suppose I want to take this to a higher limit. I can go to something like 90 degrees, right? And if I press OK, you can see that it's going to give me wider and wider islands. That's what it does. But remember, what I can do here is I know these islands are thinner, and what I can do is I can squish them in. So I can say scale across the y-axis, right, or across the z-axis, or the x-axis, so I can kind of make them thinner. And you'll see that they're going to kind of turn out to be pretty good. And so what I've resized them with is something like 0.3 across the x-axis here. And so it's not bad. It's not going to be perfect, but we're not going to see this very much here, so I'm not really worried about it. Okay. You can also do it manually, Sam. So I'm using it so it's quick. But what you can also do is you could change the shape of the island so it's proportional to what you're seeing here. And there's other techniques that you can use, which we'll talk about later on, where we actually create a checkerboard pattern. And when the checkerboard pattern is proportional, so we actually see the checkerboard kind of applied properly on the object, you know it's proportional. The one thing we don't want is skewing or crunching. Once we have skewing, then what ends up happening is the texture becomes skewed, and we can't see what it looks like. It looks actually like we lose resolution. What I've done with Smart UV Project is we're using a proportional scaling for what we're seeing here from different viewpoints. So if I look here, I'm going to get a proportional scaling for what it looks like from different points of view, right? But this is only a very quick approximation of what it should be. What you could also do is manually adjust things by adding in a checker pattern. So one of the things that we can do is we can add a checker pattern here to help us, like a texture, temporary texture, to help us with you know, doing the UVs perfectly. We're not going to do that here today. We're going to do that mirror modifier in object mode, or even in we're far past that now, but you would do that in the when you're starting to do the mirror modifier and you're cutting the coin in half, right? You want to do that typically in object mode, and the way you do that is go to your wrench and then click add modifier and then mirror. That's how you would do it. Yeah, you get it when you do the modifier. Once you apply the mirror modifier, I'll even add it here. Click the Z modifier here, and it'll mirror it on the other side. Okay, that's what you want to do. All right. And you can only apply it in object mode. That's right. It's definitely something that we want to have an unwrapped UV that we can actually see the texture, so the textures are applied properly, right? If we don't have an unwrapped UV that's good, then what's going to happen is when we apply materials and textures here, it's going to be skewed. The scratches aren't going to work properly on the faces, and so on. It's not going to look quite right. And it's going to be a lot of, you'll see some squished areas that don't look right, or they don't reflect properly, Sam. Okay. All right, so now that we have this, we're going to deselect all, select none. All right, so we're not going to do this. We're going to get out of UV editing mode. We're going to go back into layout mode. So there's our coin. We're going to save it. Control S to save, please. And what I want to do is the last step for today, we're going to continue this next day, is I'm going to go into our materials, and I'm just going to add in a basic material. I'm going to add a new material slot. We're going to call this material the coin material. That's what it's going to be called. And that's where we're going to stop. If you want to take it further for next day, all we really need to do, if you want to do this, and I'll record this now, you can just click some of these areas. Now, I've given you, on Blackboard, I've given you several coin textures. Download them all, please. Okay, download these all if you want to do this with me now. The biggest one is this gold texture normal map, which is about 3 megs. The rest of them are under a meg, or around a meg. Okay? And we can modify these textures later on. But what we want to do is take a look here. Here's our coin. I can click, instead of clicking in the color for the base color for our material, we can actually click this little button and start applying image textures. So I can go image texture, I can open, and I can select that GAME3004 Winter 2022 Lab 3 Sandbox is what I called it, and I have the gold texture, just a regular gold texture. Okay, so I can open that image, and I can see what it looks like here. It looks pretty gold, and it has a bit of some roughness. We can kind of we'll change the UV map so that it looks a little bit less, not as big. Okay. And we can do the same thing with the other ones. I can go down and add in, I added a few of them for you. One of them is metallic. Let's add in a metallic texture. And if you scroll down, you can see that it'll come to image texture. And you can select the same image. So metallic, which is M. Okay. And if you scroll down, there's more. There's a roughness that I've given you. Again, scroll down until you find image texture, right? And what we want to do with the roughness is select a roughness, which is R for roughness. And there we go. So it kind of matches together. There we go. And I've also got a normal map for you, which we're going to apply, as well as a, so we got roughness. Okay, we got quite a few of them so far. Okay, we got the base texture. We're going to come back to this in a second. So radius, the subsurface color we don't care about. Specular, we can increase the specularity. We got the roughness map inside here, as well as emission. We could have an emissive. And what about that normal? We also have volume, where I can change the volumetrics here as well. But let's go back into the normal. So for the normal, notice that again, one thing I can't do is select an image for the normal. So notice it says Vernoy texture, and but if I try to add an image for the normal, it's not working for us right now. So I don't know if you guys can make it work, but I couldn't make it work for this. Click on there, you can see that there's no image. So it says generated, normalized, right? UV object, camera, window, reflection. I want to pull in a texture. And it's not going to be a Voronoi texture, but rather a normal map, right? That's what I want, this thing. And for the normal map, right? For the normal map, typically what you have is you can select an object, an image. I can't do it here, okay, for the normal map. So notice I can't select a normal, all right? I want to add a normal map, but I'd have to do that using nodes, and I'm not going to do nodes right now. because typically what I want to do is I want to use my normal map to kind of map in here. I can always undo if I don't want something. So if I want to remove something, right, I can remove it from my that node. And one of the things that you can also see is you can see this thing that we're doing here in the materials, but we can also use something called node-based shading, right, to see everything that we have. So it's really great because we can not just geometry nodes. Geometry nodes are really neat because actually I can modify the geometry, but I can also, by the way, texture paint. This is what the texture looks like for what I've got. It's kind of a very scratchy texture that I've got here. I'm not going to do this. The texture has been already applied. You can see that it's already been applied to the object. There it is. So it's kind of a very splotchy texture because it's so big. So it's not texturing, right? Shading, if I go to shading, it actually shows me my shader network. So here is the shader network that you might be used to seeing, where I can actually modify each of these pieces, right? And notice that what I've got is a gold texture as well as a gold texture for metallic, and all these things are image textures. That's what they are. And I need to do the same thing for the normal map as well, where you can actually add the same idea. So remember, what you can do is you can shift D even here to pull in another version of the texture, right? Again, I'm doing that in shading, right, where I can modify these points here. But notice where when it comes to normal, there isn't a color that I can drag across, right? It won't, well, I can, but one of the things to do is if I drag a color, first of all, let's change the object. So right now we're looking at these things. You can also open an image and I can select the normal map. This is done manually here. I'm just showing you manual. Once I have the normal map, then I can use the normal that pumps into here. And what I'm hoping is it's going to give me a bit of a bump to some of the scratches that I'm seeing physically in the shape. Okay, again, I got that from shading. And what it does is it gives you nodes automatically. There's nothing for you to do to create this. It's automatically done for you. So again, we got a lot of stuff in here. And we're going to talk about node-based shader creation later. But the only one I wanted to take care of here was just the normal map. And it didn't do it properly because notice how it has this line that goes from color to normal. We also can use a converter to do the normal map properly for it to work properly. Okay, so I'll talk about this later on. But this isn't bad because all we want to do is we want to test to see what this thing looks like. Because a lot of this is going to be done in Blender anyway. Okay, let's go back to layout mode. We've got our object, save, right? It's not perfect because we got this. We can also put it under some color, so we can actually put it with some light to see what this looks like. It looks dark right now because the lights have been turned off. So let's turn the light on. And we can bring that light closer in the scene. So if I click onto the light and I want to bring it closer, just like normal, I can bring it closer, or I can increase the light so I can see what the reflections look like. Again, this is a nice preview for us here in Blender to see what it's going to look like in Unity. It's a good idea to do this now. Okay, so you can check it out and check out what the light source is going to look like from different views and how reflective. So it's not that reflective, and we're probably going to add the reflections and everything else in there. But one thing I don't like is how and it's hard to see here, but if you look closely enough, the texture is actually quite big. You're going to see that come out very, very big. I want to increase the size of the islands, scale the size of the islands so that they're not quite like this. So I'm going to go back into UV editing mode. And I just want to bring up the gold texture so you can see it. And then select all on this side. So this is what I want to do I don't want to go in object mode, but rather in edit mode. So what you want to do here is when you're in UV editing mode, you definitely want to be able to select these faces. So I want to definitely move into edit mode first, right, before we do it. Because UV editing won't allow me to do anything here. In modeling mode, notice that I want to go into edit mode, and I won't be able to do that. Because why? I'm selecting the light and not the cylinder. Let's also change the name of the cylinder from cylinder to coin. How about that? That would be good. There's coin. And same thing here. And let's bring that texture back into UV editing mode. So again, what I want to do is with the coin selected, this has to be selected, then I can move into edit mode. And if I select all those, you can see what it looks like. And you can see the areas there that are problems. Look at these areas here. Even though we kind of took care of most of it, there's still some spots where we're going to have some skewing because of the way maybe we didn't select something, or there was a face that we missed or something like that. It's possible. Again, not too worried about it, but you can see now that the texture is pretty big, and I want to scale these things up. So select all of these and scale them up so that they're at least something like twice as big. And you can see what the numbers are down here. So something like 2.0, 2.0, and 2.0. And guys, that's all we have time for today. I want to do more with you, and we're very close to finishing, but you know, we're going to do more of this next day. So just save your model and everything else, and when we go back into layout, you should see something that looks gold like this. Okay, it's not perfect. Things to play with for you on your own. You can change the amount of specularity here, so you can make it shinier or less shiny. That's one thing you could do, right? You can change a lot of the way things are being shown here. There's the sheen tint, as well as the alpha transparency, and so on. You can do a lot of this, a lot of these changes, and it's not terrible. You'll see the effect of the texture on the model itself. If you really want to, you can always go skip away and see it unlit. And that's not a bad way of looking at it as well, because you can actually see what the texture would look like unlit. If you wanted to make this coin so it was emissive, then we can add an emissive quality as well. So you can actually add an emissive thing to this. So you can kind of increase these values, you know, to kind of make it emissive. Again, I don't fully, you know, kind of recommend this, because that means the actual coin will glow. Okay, so we don't care about making it emissive, in my opinion. Okay, but again, you can always undo all those changes when we've made the emission go back. So you're following along. I'm going to watch tape to catch up on the stuff after downloading the materials. Yeah, so at the end of the day, the textures you mean. So at the end of the day, what you want to do, Sam, is remember what we want to try and do here, right? So we're going to go into the material, and I'll do this and I'll stop, guys. Kind of we're way over now. We'll go into the material, and on the right, you can see that, first of all, we can also look at a preview, which we haven't done, and it'll show you a preview of what the material looks like. A lot of times what I want to do is put that on a flat surface, and so you can kind of preview the material and make it larger so you can see what it looks like. So you can see that there's a bit of some scratches and that kind of stuff that came from the material. I know it's kind of hard to see here on my screen, but I've got the base color as a gold texture, so that's the albedo. And what I've done is every single time I've clicked on the button, so I've clicked on this button right here, and then I can select image texture. And image texture is something that I'm bringing in through my from my operating system. The only time I didn't do that, and by the way, if I click use nodes, if I click use nodes for a second, that would be very bad, right? Because what it's going to do is going to remove everything again. So I can undo that change, right? But I can always go into shading, right? So if I'm on the top there, there's modeling, UV editing, texture point, and there's something called shading. Then under shading, what you get is, here's what the nodes that are attached to my principal BSDF shader look like. Take a look, right? So you can see that I have my principal BSDF shader with a bunch of properties, and I have all of these image textures. That's what these are. So these are all image textures that have been added into my my shader, and if you click onto them, it gives you a preview on the left of what those textures will look like. So you can actually zoom in to see them. So this is what they've done. They've added a few scratches for the texture, and every time you click on one of these things, it'll show you what the image texture looks like on the left. And this is again inside of shading mode. All I've done to add in the normal map is I've selected a shader or a process, so it's something I want to do, and I've I've selected Shift D. Shift D actually duplicates one of these things, and then I have an extra node. I can also delete stuff by just pressing the delete key. So this is just like we normally do. We'll go more into how to use nodes or visual scripting to create our shaders later on. I know. I'm sorry. You're all right.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go.
I missed the part when you did the UV map for the inner ridges of the coin. And
Yeah.
I went through the outer edge and the faces of the coin, but I missed the inner ridge.
So all I did was for the inner ridge, these ones here. Notice that these are the ones that I've done here. See how they're kind of in the same shape, somewhat, to what I had before. And you can see also that there's some like look at this. If I select this one and this one, it's okay. But I got this one line here that didn't come up when I was doing this. Watch. If I keep clicking, now look how I got this line here. What's that line?
Yeah.
You know what that line is? That line is additional information because I have extra vertices. I need to do some cleaning up on my model, and then some of these lines will disappear, right? But basically what I do is I select all these vertices here like this. Oops, not that one. And I select them all from both sides, and then instead of doing a what we did before, right? So this is what I'm doing. I'm just selecting them all. I want to do a, when I press U, I want to do a smart UV project. And when I do that, it's going to make them very fat. And all I've done is just scaled them in across the y-axis so to make them thinner and more proportional to what I'm seeing here. That's all I've done. So when you do a smart UV project, right, it'll make these islands a little bit fatter, right? And what you can do is you can actually scale just these islands to make them proportional to what you're seeing here, which is what I've done. Again, not using any guideline and just using my eye. The right way to do this, of course, would be to have some kind of guide texture that we can put on, and that guide texture is going to give us show us how skewed everything is. Okay, we won't do that today because it's too much. But we can do it at the same time as the other side. So if I kind of select the other sides, you can see that they kind of overlay next to them, right? That's all I'm doing. And if you see how they ended up turning out, I'm just using a smart UV project for these ones. Right, and if I did that, you can see how all of these textures are kind of only the ones from inside of here. Okay, that's all I did.
So smart UV project at what angle? And
yeah, and I put it, the angle I use is 90 degrees. Right, so that way you get pretty fat islands, but you can scale them so that they look better.
Yeah, but weird how when you do that, there's like one face that's missed or something.
Shouldn't be. Just make sure you get everything first because you need to select all those faces and then you should be fine. Okay, so now that's one thing. One thing to note is that we have these extra pieces of geometry. Look at that extra vertex. We don't want that, and the way to fix that is if I go into, I'm in edit mode here anyway. If I select all, see these little pieces of geometry here? What I can do is I want to clean up. So I can go to Mesh, and under Cleanup, I can do Delete Loose. So I'll start with that. So any kind of loose vertices are gone, right? That's the one thing. And the other one I want to do is if I go to Mesh, I also want to go to Cleanup, and I want to, you can also choose Merge by Distance. And you can see that Merge by Distance is going to remove 24 vertices that are layered on top of each other, right? So this is good because it's going to remove additional geometry that I don't need, which is going to mess up my shading and everything else, right? You can increase this limit to make it more. So if I go to 1.0101, I actually remove those extra pieces there because that was just what it was. It was extra geometry because I did extruding twice, and you might do that too, and you can just erase those extra verts that are layered on top of each other. That's all they've done. And I did that with Mesh, Cleanup, and I did Delete Loose, and also Merge by Distance. Merge by Distance means if there's two vertices that are on top of each other, it removes one of them. So it reduces geometry is what I'm doing here. Be careful not to do too much of this because you could make it so your whole object collapses if you make this large enough, right? So don't do that. All right, good. We're done. We're done. We're way done. All right, this is my object. Save, right, as an example, and let's close Blender off. We're not done in terms of the animation piece, but we're done with this piece. This is where we'll start for next day. Okay, any questions before we go for the day? I know we went way over, right? We blew past our stuff by about half an hour.
You said this is going to be a 4 hour. This should be a 4 hour.
I know. It is what it is. But look what we've like. Even for a stupid coin, it takes a long time to do properly because of the UV unwrapping and the texturing and a bunch of other stuff. Talking, like we got to talk somewhat too, right? Mandeep, if you really want me to, I will. But you should be able to do this on your own. This part. All right, this is the part that, I mean, you already have the coin. You should be able to follow from there. Okay. Any other questions before we go for the day, guys?
That should be it. I'll add the other texture maps on my own time.
Okay. Guys, thank you so much. I'm going to stop recording here on YouTube, and I'll meet you guys back on Thursday for the second part. Any questions before we go